Hello, and welcome to the North Coast Journal Preview. This is a show where we talk about the current edition of the North Coast Journal. My name is Matt Knight, and I am in for David Frank this week. I'm joined today by news editor Thad Greenson and staff writer Linda Stansberry. Hi, guys.
Hi, Matt. How you doing?
I'm doing well. It's, the birds are singing. We're going to hear more about that later. And it's a beautiful day in the neighborhood. So I think we're just going to crack on, as they say, and go straight into what's on the cover of the North Coast Journal this week.
Yes, I wrote a cover story this week. I think it is my very first-person perspective cover story. Kind of a departure from the usual approach the North Coast Journal takes, and it is about a recent experience I had with prescribed burning on my family ranch in southern Humboldt. And I wrote it in part just to demystify prescribed burning as a land management option for landowners, and also make it feel a little more accessible to people who may not know about prescribed burning, but might be interested in using it to manage their land. And it is all about that process. We had a burn that took place in February of this year.
Okay, so this is a burn that you was managed by CAL FIRE. And is this part, now I noticed it was this something in conjunction with the Save the Redwoods League as well, or is that ancillary to what we're talking about?
Well, there was a long list of credits on this project, and I'm going to miss a few, so my apologies in advance. But yes, the Save the Redwoods League, which holds some property or has a conservation easement on some property adjacent to our family land, helped coordinate a grant with CAL FIRE, which is investing in, preventing wildfires on privately owned land. And they hired folks from the Mattole Restoration Council, which, full disclosure, a board member on the MRC. And a lot of different people came together to help this come out well. So that was the Honeydew Volunteer Fire Company, the Telegraph Ridge Fire Company, I believe Petrolia was there, the CAL FIRE folks were there, members of the Prescribed Burn Association, several students from Cal Poly Humboldt, and some other people that I'm forgetting, as well as, my own family, extended cousins, and a lot of people who wanted to just see us light the ranch on fire. Right.
So let's talk a little bit about why this is something that's required or needed in today's world. In reading your story, the Native American population would burn portions of the landscape, to encourage, acorns growing and to clear out brush. But with the advent of modern fire management, that all kind of went by the wayside. Why don't you talk a little bit about the history behind this?
Okay. Well, our ranch is the traditional home of the Sinkyone people, and they and many other indigenous people in our region use fire to manage land. So, yes, to encourage acorn crops and from what I understand, also to rotate wildlife from one area to another. I don't claim to be an expert on these things by any means, but yes, after the region was colonized, fire became a less widely used tool. It's always been a land management tool for traditional agriculture in some respects because it enriches soil, it reduces the fuel load, so that's brush and other vegetation that will really make a wildfire go worse than it would have otherwise. And as I said, it also reduces invasive species, or I guess in our case would be intrusive species. So we have a long-standing issue with Doug fir seedlings kind of taking over our grazing land and outperforming our traditional oak woodlands. And that is in large part, I believe, because that land isn't being managed through burning the way it was traditionally. So Doug firs, they outcompete oaks. They grow really fast. They grow really tall. Some people have referred to them as straws. They're really efficient at sucking up the water table there. And so in a lot of places in our region, these oak woodlands, these stands of beautiful oaks that have been there for, many, many years, are being choked out by firs because the firs aren't being managed. We were really interested in seeing how a prescribed burn, and this was a 109-acre burn, so it wasn't small. We were really interested in seeing how that would impact those small Doug firs and whether or not that would be effective.
So how long has it been since the burn took place? And was it in February? Is that when they did it?
Yes, we had what the Prescribed Burn Association called a perfect burn window in February because it was unseasonably dry. As everyone knows, we had a bad year in terms of drought, but the conditions were such that it was not scary to think of doing a prescribed burn. We had the right wind factor, we had the right moisture factor, just everything was exactly right to do prescribed fire.
And so you've had a few months for, things to grow back and grow up and that sort of thing. What do you think the results are?
Yes, although we did have a little bit of an unusual spring with a lot of, late welcome rains. So who knows what that means in terms of its impact on vegetation. We did see that some of those small firs were taken out and a little bit blistered by the fire. I would be interested in, revisiting that and seeing if there's a more effective method of using prescribed fire to take on those firs, or I guess I'll just have to keep being out there with my loppers and do it the old-fashioned way.
Right. So now, is this a program that has got legs? Is it's something that's going to be going on throughout the county? And what do you think? How widespread do you think that this is going to be on a go-forward basis?
Well, the Prescribed Burn Association and the Cultural Fire Management Council, which is a traditional burning organization, they've been doing this work for quite a while. I would say the major pinch point for doing more prescribed fire is really funding and lack of personnel. So that is being addressed in some respects. The Matilda Restoration Council actually recently got a grant to train more people in prescribed fire. When you have a prescribed burn, you need what's called a burn boss. So this is an expert, and I mentioned Phil Dye with Prometheus Fire was the burn boss on this operation. And he gets paid good money to do what he wants to do. So if you are out there and you are thinking about getting into a career in prescribed fire, the state needs more burn bosses. I think that the financial aspect of having prescribed burns might be an issue for a lot of people who would be interested in doing it in their land. However, there are grants available. Many local nonprofits that involved in restoration are interested in doing this and studying it. So I say speak to your friendly local nonprofit and see if they can help you out.
Well, just from a personal standpoint, I had some fire flashbacks myself, hearing about you and your brother packing up your toys and stuff from a past fire, because I went through something very similar down in Southern California where it got very close to where we were at. We were on the point of evacuation, and really loading stuff into the car. So I kind of have a little PTSD from that. But just from a standpoint of having fire on your property, I mean, it must have been nervous making, I guess, would be what I would think, or were you just supremely confident that everything was going to go fine?
I was supremely confident that everything was going to go fine. I mean, if you're going to have a fire, whether it's a prescribed fire or an unwelcome fire, how much better could you do than having, 5 or 6 fire agencies on site at the time of the fire? Everybody knew what they were doing. They were professionals. And as I mentioned before, the burn boss, Phil Dye, was just a consummate professional, very organized. I was a little surprised at the extremity of the fire, just because we had done a prescribed burn a couple of years ago, and that one was very anticlimactic. We burned some pasture land also with invasive species, and it was just kind of smoldering, and there were about 80 people sitting around watching like a little wisp of smoke and trying to get it to catch and everything. And this most recent one was nothing like that. We had flames, we had smoke, we had, like 30, 40 people with drip torches walking through the woods, catching stuff on fire. And yet, I did not feel worried at all. Of course, I was, my job was to run the chuck wagon, so I had all of the snacks and refreshments and safety supplies. So I didn't get to get as close of a look at it as I would have liked. But from talking to people who were on the ground at that day, they were also feeling very confident. And we also had several people stay overnight and keep an eye on things out there in the woods. Everything went just about as well as it could possibly go.
Real quick, though, Matt, if you don't mind, before we move on, I just wanted to touch on Linda's story and kind of your last question. I think that I think it's natural for a lot of people to have anxiety about setting any land up here on fire, given the years of drought and the mega fires we've been seeing. And that's actually one of the reasons we wanted to, run Linda's story, is because I think it really does demystify it and make clear just how safe and just how many precautions and just how much expertise goes into doing one of these things. And so we'd written a lot in the past about prescribed fire and kind of this movement back toward using fire as a land management tool, like Linda said. But I think what that looks like in practice on the ground is still, mysterious and a bit intimidating to a lot of folks. And so we saw a lot of value in sharing Linda's experience.
Yeah, a lot of great detail in the story for people who want to know about this and might want to sign up. Who knows? Yep. So we're going to move on to Thad. Thad is going to be our Jennifer this week, and he's got a couple of items that I think she would normally field, but he'll do with aplomb, no doubt.
A very poor replacement, but I'll do my best. We have a packed back of the book this week with a bunch of interesting stuff, but I wanted to talk about 2 pieces specifically. One is the table piece this week is by Simona Carini, a regular freelancer for us who does shares all kinds of wonderful vegetable recipes generally. She is an avid farmers market enthusiast, and so this week is kind of a celebration of farmers markets kind of coming into full swing locally. With just the bounty and variety that is peak summer up here. So she shares a really simple but really delightful recipe for roasted vegetables. So the recipe she shares is zucchini, tomatoes, and
eggplant.
Eggplant, yes. I'm not a huge eggplant fan, so I always forget eggplant.
Me neither.
But and she talks about kind of going and picking out different, it's not just we're so lucky up here. You can go to the farmer's market. It's not just a question of picking up zucchini, but it's about picking out exactly which varietal of zucchini you want. So she kind of walks folks through, like I said, the local bounty, and then shares this really simple recipe, which is basically just dicing or cubing all of these ingredients, or these 3 basic ingredients, and then roasting them in a hot oven with some olive oil and herbs and seasoning. And personally, I love this recipe despite my ambivalence about eggplant. And I've found in recent years that I actually just love roast vegetables as a side. And it's for folks who, I don't know, maybe think that side vegetables somehow need to be dressed up and really fancy. Roast vegetables is just a really simple side that really, to me, kind of accentuates a lot of different types of vegetables, from broccoli all the way to things like eggplant, and gives the cook a lot of freedom to leave things crispy, to cook them until they're mush, kind of however they want to do them. And this is, I think, Simona's recipe is a really basic building block for that. So if folks haven't, delved into roasting their vegetables, this is a really easy entry point.
I was just going to say, it looks like something that just about anybody can do. You don't have to be a gourmet cook to do this, and it'll come out really great. Yeah, absolutely. And if you like the style, then it's you can replicate it with everything, like I said, from carrots to broccoli to everything in between. It's a really accessible recipe, which is great. Awesome.
Yeah, and then on the outdoors front, we have a really nice piece from Sarah Hobart, who has been sharing a series now with us of birding pieces, and kind of she came to us as a beginning birder and kind of wanted to share her experience of getting into this seemingly mysterious world of birding. This week she has a really interesting one about bird calls and bird sounds. And I, not being a birder myself, I had never kind of realized that the midsummer months are kind of the doldrums of birding, and birds are harder to spot. A lot of them hunker down in their nests, raising their young, and so she kind of describes going to the Arcata Marsh and Wildlife Sanctuary and seeing kind of barren mud flats, and not being able to spot much out there. And she has kind of found the anecdote for herself to quench that birding thirst during these slow months, which is really focusing in on bird calls, and that even though the birds aren't visible, they're still around and they're still making noise. So she identifies 3 tools that she's kind of used in doing that. First, 2 apps, Merlin Bird ID and BirdNet, one of which is an app that allows you to kind of record a bird call on your phone and then upload it to this app, and then it'll tell you or kind of give you some options of what it is, which I thought was interesting. And the other, Merlin Bird ID, actually allows you to hit record on your phone and go out on a walk, and it will pick up all the little sounds in the background and then come up with a list at the end of your walk of all the birds that you walked by and were in your area, which I thought was really cool. But the main focus of her piece is actually a local effort to do the same. So she talked to Robert Childs, who is a retired science teacher from Eureka High School, who spent a couple years putting together this website, ear birding, so birding with your ear, earbirdinghumboldt.com. And he has uploaded dozens of local bird calls to this website, and sorted them based on types of calls. So if you hear something that that you're not sure what it is out and about, you can go to this website and then decide that it was a shriek or a warbler or whatever, and go to the site, and they'll be categorized, and then you can listen to all these different calls and try to figure out exactly what you heard. And then it also sounds like it has some fun stuff like quizzes, bird call quizzes, and things like that can stimulate the inner bird nerd in all of us.
That's right. Well, that's terrific. We have a segment here on the radio station called For the Birds. It's made by this lady named Laura Erickson, and she's always on about what she's recording and talking about. So I'm semi-familiar with some of this stuff just from listening to her little podcast about it. But yeah, fascinating stuff. You hear the birds, but you don't. I can kind of pick out. I know what a varied thrush sounds like because it's very distinctive. But for the other birds, they're just generic. Right?
You are one up on me. I can't say that I could identify a single bird call, but my daughter actually has taken a shining to bird watching, and so we've been doing more of it. So maybe that's the next step.
Great. So in about 4 minutes we have left. Is there anything else that you're following this week?
Yeah. So putting my news hat back on, we had a long-awaited release on Friday from the state controller's office, who, as I think regular viewers, listeners, and readers will remember, was conducted a months-long investigation into the county of Humboldt's finances and why the county can't seem to get its financial reports to the state on time. And so they spent months doing the investigation, and then this report has undergone apparently months of review and was just released on Friday. And, I think in certain respect, its findings aren't terribly surprising. There has been a lot of talk about a backlog of journal entries and an inability to do account reconciliations in the county. And those became a huge flashpoint with our previous auditor controller, our recently departed auditor controller, Karen Paz Dominguez. And there's a lot of questions about why these financial reports couldn't get done. And to some extent, the state controller's office doesn't entirely answer those questions. I mean, it says that there was these failings and that these things weren't getting done. It doesn't really finger point as to why these things weren't getting done or who wasn't doing them. But it outlines pretty thoroughly kind of some of the deficiencies as far as various departments working together, and makes clear that for kind of a variety of reasons that wasn't happening, and it points to kind of a lack of training and certainly points heavily to a staffing shortage in the auditor controller's office. In addition to just being understaffed kind of pervasively, it also notes that they've had like an average of 3 vacant positions throughout kind of the duration of these problems, getting reports to the state on time. So I think as has been well reported, vacancies in county positions throughout all departments have been pretty pervasive. That's why the county passed a pretty significant pay increase last year for all workers. And so the auditor controller's office was not immune to that, and certainly that exacerbated existing problems. And then kind of lastly, makes clear that that communication between departments was problematic, to say the least. And I think, there's one line that really jumped out at me in the report, which is the state controller's office kind of urging Humboldt County to prioritize competence in kind of at all levels. And,
always a good thing.
Yeah, I don't think that's
Competence is
something
a
that
good
should
thing.
necessarily be like if you have to be told to prioritize competence, you're doing probably a lot of things wrong.
Right.
So, I mean, I think one of the big takeaways of the report is that for all of the focus on Karen Paz Dominguez and her job performance, over the last couple of years, kind of whatever you thought of her in that role, there's still a lot of work to be done now that Cheryl Dillingham will be taking office, and a lot of some pretty significant backlogs to address, all while stepping into an office that remains short-staffed with all of the challenges that existed before.
Wow. Okay. That's a lot.
It is.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Thad and Linda, so much for coming on this week. That's about all the time we have for this week anyway. And hopefully Dave and perhaps Jennifer will be back next week. And you won't have to have me here.
Nor me talking about food.
North Coast Journal is on newsstands now. It's available online 24 hours a day and 7 days a week. Thad and Linda, thanks so much. We'll see you again next week.